Waitress serves rude millionaire. She doesn't know he's her biological father. The diner was nearly empty when the black Mercedes pulled up outside. Inside, Emily adjusted her apron, balancing 2 trays of coffee mugs. She was working double shifts just to cover rent, but she carried herself with quiet dignity. A tall man in an expensive suit stepped in. His wristwatch alone looked worth more than her entire year's salary. He slid into a booth by the window, snapping his fingers at her as though she were invisible until he needed something. Coffee, black, and make it quick, he ordered without looking up from his phone. Emily bit her lip but forced a smile. Of course, sir. The arrogance in his tone stung her. She hated customers like him and who thought money gave them the right to treat others as less. Still, she did her job, pouring the coffee and placing a menu on the table. When he finally looked up, his eyes lingered on her face. Something flickered in his expression, as if he recognized something familiar, but he quickly covered it with indifference. "Young lady," he said, "you should find a better job. Serving tables won't get you anywhere." Emily clenched her jaw. "Some of us don't have the luxury of choice." The man smirked, dismissing her words. But inside, his chest tightened. Her features, the curve of her eyes, the line of her chin, they mirrored someone he once loved, years ago. Robert Langston had been forced to choose between his career and the young woman he'd gotten pregnant. His wealthy family had interfered, ensuring he left her behind. He'd buried the memory, convincing himself it was for the best. He never knew what became of the child. Now, staring at this waitress, he began to wonder. Emily returned with his order, setting down eggs and toast. He noticed her hands tremble slightly, working too many shifts, perhaps, or maybe nerves. He surprised himself by asking, "What's your name?" "Emily," she said flatly. His fork froze. Emily, the name her mother had once whispered she would choose. He cleared his throat. "And your mother? What was her name?" Emily frowned at the odd question. "Sarah. She passed away 5 years ago." The millionaire's breath caught. Sarah, the girl he once loved, the one his family had driven away. He stared at Emily, his voice low. I knew your mother." Emily blinked. "You did?" "Yes." His eyes softened for the first time. "More than you know." Slowly, realization began to dawn on her. The man who had just insulted her, the man sitting across with guilt swimming in his eyes. "You're saying, you're my father?" she whispered. Robert nodded, shame etched across his face. "I should have been there. I wasn't. And for that, I will never forgive myself. But I swear, Emily, I never stopped thinking about what might have been." For a long moment, she just stared, torn between anger and disbelief. Part of her wanted to throw the coffee in his face, to scream at him for abandoning her mother. Another, part deep aching, vulnerably longed to believe she hadn't been fatherless all her life. Tears welled in her eyes as she whispered, "Why now? Why here?" Robert's voice cracked. "Because fate brought me back to you, and if you let me, I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make up for what I lost." Emily didn't answer right away. She walked away to tend another table, her mind spinning. But when she returned, she placed a second coffee mug on the table, not for him, but for herself. She sat across from him. "Then let's start with breakfast," she said softly, and for the first time in 24 years, Robert smiled, not as a millionaire, but as a father finally given a second chance. The bell above the door jingled as the black Mercedes rolled to a stop outside the roadside diner. It was late morning, the lull between the breakfast rush and the lunch crowd. The air smelled of coffee and frying bacon, and the neon sign hummed softly. Emily adjusted her apron, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. 24 years old, sharpened but weary, she had been working since dawn. Rent was due in 3 days. Tips had been sparse. And now, as she saw the man step through the door, she braced herself. He carried himself like he owned the world, tailored suit, polished shoes, gold cufflinks. The kind of man who looked at a small-town diner as though stepping into a foreign land. He sat at the booth by the window and tapped his phone impatiently. "Coffee," he barked without looking at her. "Black hot." Emily gritted her teeth, but forced a polite smile. "Coming right up, sir." When she returned with the steaming cup, he finally looked at her, hand froze. His eyes lingered, searching her face. Something about her shook him, but he quickly hid it, smirking instead. "You should find a better job," he said casually. "A place like this will keep you stuck forever." Emily stiffened. "Some of us don't get to choose." Her reply surprised him. Most people shrank in his presence. But this waitress, she had fire in her voice. He was about to retort when she walked away, hips squared, head held high, and in that moment, Robert Langston felt something he hadn't in years: guilt. The ghost of the past Robert was a self-made millionaire, or so he liked people to believe. The truth was, he'd been born into wealth, raised in a family that valued reputation over love. Decades ago, as a young man, he had fallen in love with a girl named Sarah, poor, beautiful, stubborn. When she became pregnant, Robert swore he would stand by her, but his parents intervened. They sent him overseas on business, cut off contact, and threatened to destroy his inheritance if he didn't obey. Weak, foolish, and desperate for approval, Robert abandoned Sarah. He never knew what became of the child, until now. Recognition. Emily returned with his breakfast: eggs, toast, and hash browns. As she set the plate down, his hands trembled. "What's your name?" he asked, trying to sound casual. "Emily," she said flatly. His fork froze. Emily, the name Sarah once whispered in his ear, the name she swore she would give their child. He cleared his throat. "Your mother, what was her name?" Emily frowned at the odd question. "Sarah. She passed away 5 years ago." The world tilted under Robert's feet. It was her. It had to be. He stared, his voice thick. I knew her." Emily blinked. "You did?" Robert swallowed hard. "Yes, more than you know." And then the truth slipped out, raw and heavy. "I'm your father." The diner erupts. The words hung in the air like thunder. Emily stared at him, mouth open, hands trembling. Across the counter, a cook stopped flipping pancakes. A couple at a nearby booth exchanged wide-eyed glances. Even the hum of the neon sign seemed to hush. Emily's voice cracked. "What did you just say?" Robert leaned forward, eyes pleading. "Emily, I swear it's true. I was young, foolish. I let my family control me. I should have been there. I wasn't, and I will regret it until the day I die." Her face flushed with anger. "So now you just waltz in here, insulting me, and then claim you're my father. Do you know what it was like growing up without one? Watching Mom struggle? Watching her work herself sick just so I could eat?" Tears welled in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. The diner manager, a gruff man named Tom, stepped forward protectively. "Is this guy bothering you, Em?" Emily shook her head faintly. "No, Tom, I need to hear this." The off voice cracked as he leaned across the table. "Emily, I can't change the past, but I can change now. I'll give you anything you want: money, a house, a better life. You don't have to struggle anymore." Her hands balled into fists. "You think money fixes everything? You think you can buy your way into being a father?" Robert looked down, ashamed. For the first time in decades, he felt powerless. "I don't want your money," Emily whispered. "I wanted you, and you weren't there." The test. Over the next week, Robert kept returning to the diner. Sometimes he sat in silence, watching her work. Sometimes he tried small talk. The staff whispered, suspicious. Emily kept her guard up, torn between hatred and a yearning she couldn't admit. Finally, Emily gave him a chance. "If you want to prove you're my father," she said one evening as they closed up, "you'll have to earn it. No more suits. No more money. Just you. Show up tomorrow at 6 a.m. and help me open. Robert hesitated. He hadn't worked a menial job in decades, but he agreed. The next morning, the millionaire billionaire heir was seen scrubbing counters, hauling boxes of supplies, and burning his hands on hot coffee pots. The staff chuckled. Emily watched silently, and for the first time, she believed he might actually be trying. Family secrets. Just as a fragile bond began to form, trouble struck. News of Robert's long-lost daughter leaked to the press. His corporate lawyers arrived, warning him that acknowledging Emily could complicate his inheritance empire. His board of directors demanded he sever ties, but Robert didn't care anymore. He made a choice he should have made decades ago. At a press conference he announced, "This is my daughter Emily. I failed her once. I will not fail her again." The cameras flashed. Emily stood beside him, nervous but proud. A new beginning back at the diner. Emily sat across from Robert, again, 2 steaming mugs of coffee between them. "I don't know if I can forgive you completely," she admitted. Robert nodded, his eyes glistening. "I don't expect forgiveness, just a chance to try." Emily exhaled slowly, then pushed 1 mug toward him. "Then let's start with breakfast," she said softly. For the first time in 24 years, Robert smiled, not as a millionaire, not as a tycoon, but as a father finally given a second chance.